You know that feeling, right? When you're about to speak or maybe type something in English and you just hesitate. You start worrying, am I using the wrong word? Is this grammar incorrect? Well, that feeling of uncertainty, it actually opens up a much, much bigger question.
And that question is, what even is correct English? And maybe more importantly, who gets to decide? Let's dive in and really unpack that.
You see, as English has spread all over the globe, it's not really just one language anymore. What we're actually talking about now are many different Englishes.
And this has created a huge divide, a real fault line in the language. The central conflict is this. Is English breaking, or is it just evolving? Because what one person calls a simple error, someone else sees as a vibrant local innovation.
Now, this isn't just some casual disagreement. Oh no, it's a full-blown academic showdown that really heated up back in the 1990s, and it was pretty much personified by two very different thinkers.
So the whole debate really boils down to two main camps. On one side, you've got Randolph Quirk, who represents the deficit view. For him, it's simple. Any deviation from a native standard, British or American English, is just an error, period. But on the other side, you've got Braj Khatru. He championed what's called the difference view. He argued that these variations aren't mistakes at all. They're new, totally valid forms of English that are emerging all across the world.
And their disagreement really came from a pretty fundamental question. Why do people even learn English in the first place? For Quirk, it was all about utility. He thought learners need standard English to communicate with native speakers to get ahead in their careers. But Khatru pointed out a different reality. The fact is, most English conversations today happen between non-native speakers. And they're using the language to express their own unique cultures, not just to chat with someone from London or New York.
Quirk was really blunt about his worries. He felt that if we start accepting all these new variations, it's a slippery slope. He actually said, the temptation is great to justify errors in euphemistically sociolinguistic terms. In other words, he thought it was just making fancy excuses for bad grammar.
But Khatru came back with his powerful counter-argument. He said that what Quirk sees as a deficit is actually, and I'm quoting here, a matter of difference which is based on vital sociolinguistic realities of identity, creativity, and linguistic and cultural contact. So for Khatru, these weren't errors at all. They were the sounds of new cultures taking English and making it their own.
So for years, the debate was pretty much stuck there, right between deficit and difference. But then another linguist came into the picture and completely changed the conversation.
And that linguist was Henry Whittleson. He took this whole debate to another level by asking a totally radical new question. He wasn't just interested in what was correct. He wanted to know who had the power to decide what's correct in the first place.
And his conclusion? Wow, it was explosive. Just listen to this quote. How English develops in the world is no business whatever of native speakers. They are irrelevant. I mean, that is a complete game changer. Whittleson was basically saying that native speakers have lost their claim to the language they thought was theirs.
Whitteson's really crucial point was that correctness isn't always about being clear. He argued that standard English grammar often gets used as a shibboleth, and a shibboleth is basically a kind of social password. It's a custom or a way of speaking that separates an in-group from an out-group. So in this case, proper grammar becomes a gatekeeping tool to decide who gets into the elite club and who's left out.
And this real-world example just illustrates his point perfectly. Okay, take the word depone. It's a very technical legal term, but it's accepted as standard English. No problem. Now look at prepone. It's an Indian English word, and it logically means to bring forward. The opposite of postpone. Makes perfect sense, and yet it's often just dismissed as a quaint, non-standard word. So what's with the double standard? Whittleson would argue it's because prepone was created by a non-native speaking community, so the gatekeepers of the language just don't see it as the real deal.
Now, this isn't just some abstract academic debate happening in an ivory tower. It has very, very real consequences.
So, what does all of this actually mean for the millions and millions of people who have to take high-stakes English tests every single year?
Well, think about it. International tests like TOEIC and IELTS, they're a massive business, and they often measure your skill based on a native speaker standard. They're basically testing how close you can get to sounding like someone from the UK or the US, which, when you think about it, is just Quirk's deficit model put into practice on a global scale.
And just look at what often gets marked as an error on these tests. Things like saying equipments or informations, or using phrases like discuss about a topic, or even a certain way of using the word would. In places like Nigeria, Singapore, and India, these are perfectly standard. They're not mistakes at all in those varieties of English.
So what's happening here? It means that what's getting flagged as an error on some big international English test might actually be a perfectly normal, perfectly correct feature of a person's own local standard English. You're basically getting penalized for speaking your own valid version of the language.
At the end of the day, the future of English isn't being decided in universities or by people who write textbooks. The real answer to the question, who owns English, is being worked out every single day by the actions and the attitudes of the hundreds of millions of people who use it all around the world.
So the next time you hear a phrase that sounds a little different to you, the question shouldn't just be, is that correct? The bigger question we should all be asking is this: is it a mistake, or are you actually hearing the future of English being born right in front of you?